lot of businesses are doing this? Because it's cheaper or easier, or because they reach their customers? But then what do they do with their customers once they've reached them?
They put their mobile numbers or their website
Yeah.
on their page of Facebook. So
Right.
if you want to know more about this, you will click only you reach the website.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think of it. They just put their phone number and then done. Call me if you want to hire me. Yeah.
Disgraceful behavior.
Disgraceful?
Well, not good. No, it's the same in Ireland. It's identical. We're seeing a lot of small businesses. You see the ads, like you're walking along the street, you look in the shop windows, it's like, you know, this is us online at facebook.com/.
And now Instagram.
Yeah, and Pinterest.
Yes.
So, you know, the analogy I like to think of is Facebook.com is like a building, like a mall, right? And you basically are putting your store into the Facebook mall. And that's fine, but what if the mall burns down, right?
Or increases the rent.
Or increases the rent, or tells you you can't put your phone number on the mall website. No phone numbers allowed. You got only the Facebook phone number.
Yeah, they've done that.
Right? So, you know, your URL that you're advertising, here's your brand. But you're also advertising the Facebook brand plus the Verisign brand. There's two other brands every time you do advertising. That's not, why are you promoting their business instead of just yours, right?
It's social.
It's what?
It's social.
Yeah. Well, it obviously makes sense if you're starting off maybe and you just want to reach those customers. But at some point, you're tying your fortune, your future, to these other brands that might decide you can't put your phone number on the page anymore. Facebook will handle the phone call and route it to you for 10 cents. Because they want to be in that, they want to be a telco now.
Look at what happened with, what's it called, Meerkat?
Right.
It's a new video streaming social network type of thing which relies on Twitter. So the only way it would work was for the application to have access to Twitter. So that was fine when nobody was using it. A couple of weeks ago during South by Southwest, thousands of people started using it and Twitter turned around and went, oh, and pulled the plug. Well, almost pulled the plug. So Meerkat's growth is limited by Twitter. And of course, then Twitter launched their competing product called, how's it called?
So it's already come out?
Yeah. I have it on my other device. I don't have it on this device yet.
So Twitter shut down that business
Yeah,
and they launched their own.
pretty much.
That's why you might not want to be on just on Facebook. They'll compete with you, right?
Oh, and then some.
And then some.
Periscope. Periscope from Twitter, which I will now install.
Right.
Now they've done that repeatedly. A lot of, if you use Twitter or Facebook and other things for business, you start using third-party tools. And the only way that they will work properly is if they have complete access. But Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and others have started limiting the access. So some of those businesses have vanished because they can't add any more users, which is a bit of a problem. Build your entire business and then have it taken away. Of course, those of us who are cynical and evil would say, well, you shouldn't have built your business using somebody else's toys, you know. You never had it to begin with.
Right. So back to putting together your business plan. And this is actually a good discussion because as part of our business plan, we have to identify how do we find our customers? How do we acquire them?
You also identify risks.
Yes, we also identify risks. But certainly, Facebook may be a place where you can find customers at a fairly low cost.
Well, if it's the only place that you're finding the customers, then it's also a huge risk.
Yeah.
This from the person who's never written a business plan, though. I get other people to write business plans for me.
So you have to ask yourself, well, who has, the other thing is, they're not a customer necessarily unless you have a way of generating money from them. Mostly that's because, you do that because they pay you for a service, right? Facebook, Google, Twitter don't get paid by their users, right?
But the user is the product.
Yep, so they're making money some other way that's obvious, sometimes not obvious. So as part of, you got to define your business model. And maybe, so, for example, the domain name space, the biggest threat to the domain name industry right now is someone that comes out and doesn't charge for domain names. Right? Google has applied for 100 TLDs. What if they just, and you know, you already get free email from Google, right? Free web page. What if they give you a free domain name? That's going to be very disruptive to every TLD registry in the world.
And registrar.
And registrar, right? So Google is a huge, huge threat, huge disruptive threat if they want to be. Amazon is too. Amazon has 75 TLDs, right? So you're talking about risk to your business, to your TLD business or to a registrar business. Is what if customers didn't have to pay for names anymore, right? Google has rights to .blog. They could give them away. They could.
Don't have rights to upload.
Who has .blog?
It was the Colombian guy, Gerardo.
How much
Gerardo Aristotle.
How much did he pay for that?
Oh,
Tens of millions of bucks.
I can't remember.
So he beat out. So these guys, so Google's not going to give it away. Geraldo's not going to give it away.
No, he's not going to give it. Thank you.
Google has .app.
Yes.
They could give app away, right? So every app on your phone, instead of going to a .com website, could go to a .app website that Google gives away. Now Google has the biggest app store on the internet, so they give everyone a free preference. Right? That's huge. That's disruptive. It's disruptive to guys, most of the guys like GoDaddy, who are serving this mass market. It's not disruptive to me because I don't compete with GoDaddy.
It is disruptive to me, because I do.
Right. So that's part of your, when you come up with a big business model, you can be creative sometimes. And maybe your main end users are not the people who actually pay your business model. Someone else will pay maybe to reach that audience. Right? So Cooking maybe could give away domain names to people who like to cook, and they make all their money by running ads, or letting advertisers reach their customer base. .tv. You know, .tv is a country code for Tuvalu. It's now run by VeriSign, and it's used for television, right, in the U.S. I've always maintained they made a big, big mistake when they launched this new TLD for television. Instead of charging for the names, I would not have charged for the names. In fact, I would have highly restricted who could get one. I only would have given out a .tv name to actual TV shows. Right? That's the only ones that get a .tv name. And then I would train the public to say, whatever your favorite TV show is, who has a favorite TV show? What do you watch?
Over .tv, no, but
What do you like to watch on TV? Talk shows like what?
It's something Egyptian on CBC channel here in Egypt.
Okay.
Yes.
So think of your favorite TV show, or in our case, a comedy show like
Big Bang Theory.
Huh?
Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory, right? So if you want to buy a T-shirt that you just saw on the TV show, right, or a hat, all you have to do is say BigBangTheory.tv, and you're presented with an e-commerce site to buy clothing for that TV show, right? And if I was a registry, I would give them that domain name. I wouldn't charge for it, but I want 5% of the revenue you generate on your website. That would be my business model for .tv. The names are free. You only can get one if you have a TV show. You give me a percentage of your revenue. Perfect business model, right? And everyone in the world would know whenever a new TV show came out, oh, it's blank.tv. That's how I find their website, right? Perfect model. It's a different way of thinking in terms of business model. You're not in the domain name business. You're in the e-commerce business, right? And so you can be creative sometimes with these registers.
Creativity.
I'm sorry?
Creativity.
Yeah. So, when you come up with your business plan, you also obviously have to identify who your customer is, what their age group is, are they individuals, are they corporate, are they a different type of company size. Michaeli said earlier he focuses on small businesses, or what are called SMEs. And it turns out that nearly every registrar focuses on the same market. Why? Because they're the one part of the industry that has growth, right? There's millions of new businesses started every year, right? Every one of those new businesses needs to legalize themselves, establish a corporate entity. They need to get a domain name. They need to get a website, right? So if you want to grow your business, you want to be in a growth market. Whereas if you're focusing on the top end, Fortune 1000, that's always just 1,000 companies. It's stacked. So all the growth all these GoDaddy network solutions, they're all focusing on small business because they see that's the growth opportunity.
No, I agree. I mean, the thing is, it's not just they're focusing on, say, all small businesses, because that would be pointless. I'm not going to try to sell to a small business is in Boston. No interest. I don't want to do it. I want to sell to small businesses in Europe, primarily. And the Middle East. Why not? Something about
So it's a geographic segmentation. What about language?
That's an interesting one. I mean, what we've seen is, we see people kind of coming to us who want to get the services anyway, regardless of the language. And so, I mean, if you look across, you look at, say, GoDaddy as an example, they have customers in countries where they definitely don't have any localized content, because people are looking for the service. In the case of Encirca, they're focusing on specific verticals. For us, that's not the case, but we do have certain specializations. So we are the largest registrar for the .ie CCTLD, which is awesome because everybody assumes we're the cheapest. We're not. So people come to us for .ie domains, which is great, except for .ie Pulse.
Some registrars actually focus on a particular title within the country, within the company. So, for example, there are things called corporate registrars that always sell to trademark lawyers, right? That's the person in the business that they market to. So, in 2 weeks, in a month, I'm at the annual meeting of the International Trademark Association, which has 9,000 trademark lawyers that attend. Right? And so that's a very specific job title that registrars will market to, primarily for trademark protection purposes. So they participate in the sunrise period of these utilities, or they just do it to protect their branding.
There's a lot of other services that you can sell through that. Like it's all this brand protection, corporate protection, value-added services. It's not an area that we really do. We do a small bit of it, but not much. But then again, you don't do the retail stuff we do.
Right. There are some of these new TLDs of marketing, for example, they're trying to sell through marketing agencies or public relation agencies or web design firms. They see that as their channel for their particular product.
So .wiki, for example, is offering a hosted wiki solution as part of their go-to-market strategy. I don't know what .horse is doing, because horses don't have opposable thumbs.
Right.
It's a huge market, millions of horses, but none of them can type.
Yeah, so a horse would go to, again, trade shows about horses.
Yes.
So they exhibit at those, they would advertise in horse magazines. Maybe they'd do some advertising on Facebook and Twitter to people who are talking about horses. Yeah. So as part of your business plan is to identify who your customer is and how to reach them. Right, so we have a bunch of examples here. One of the most common things to do in a business plan is something called a SWOT analysis. Anyone heard of this before? So SWOT stands for yeah,
Or challenges.
SWOT challenges, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
That's right, sorry.
And again, I'm old school, I'm sure they've expanded the acronym, right? And so this is always a great thing to do to make sure you have a unique value proposition, is analyze your competition. Right? And I can tell you, we do it on a constant basis because the competition isn't static. Right?
We do it daily.
Do it daily.
Well, yeah, pretty much.
So you're monitoring prices, looking at
Well, you just
past
want to
campaigns.
see what other people are doing. So my head of sales, he has a spreadsheet with like what we would see as a top 10 competitors we have to worry about, and he updates that almost every day with their pricing. So we're then keeping track of their trends.
Yeah. One of the things you can do is you can follow your competitors on Twitter
And Facebook.
and Facebook. So every time so you get an update right on your smartphone or saying, so-and-so just tweeted about that they're at a trade show or doing a webinar. So that's how you keep track of what your competitors are doing. So very important, I think, a good thing for certain TLDs to do as well.
How many of you here are on Twitter?
Well, how many are on Twitter as an individual versus as your organization? Right.
Okay, interesting. How many of you are on Facebook?
As an individual? Anyone on as a business? As an organization?
Okay. So most of you are on Facebook, and only some are on Twitter. It's interesting. Instagram?
Wow. Anything else? LinkedIn? How many use these social networks for their business? To do support, for example?
Small, not many companies.
Okay.
To either acquire customers or support customers?
Most companies that use this all social networks for marketing, even they have a complicated marketing strategy, so they aware of the social network benefits through in marketing,
Right.
or they outsource the marketing to another company.
So it's very common in the US anyway that if people can't reach you by phone or email, they try to reach you via Twitter. They'll complain, it's Circa, how come you're not answering your phone, right?
And at which point, Black Knight will respond going, hey, if you want a more responsive registrar, come talk to us.
That's right, see, that's why you monitor your competitors. We'll
Exactly.
handle that.
Exactly.
And I've done that many times myself. And Circa can handle that problem for you,
Exactly.
right?
Because if you're not part of the conversation is still going to continue.
Yeah, and the reason why monitoring is important is because, you know, the world isn't static. Your competitors are not static. So, and we'll talk about this in a little while about how if you're a CCTLD marketplace and you're seeing the threat of all these new TLDs, there's no reason you need to stay the way you are. You can adapt to this new environment and compete.
Or don't. And die. I mean, the evolution is going to happen with or without you. That's the reality. But the example, like when you're looking at, say, domains, typical small business is going to register one. They're not going to register 20. So do you want it to be your one or another one? Sorry, CCD.GLB people, should be nice to them, I suppose.
Right, and we're also, the other counterpoint is, maybe they won't register any, Maybe they'll just live on Facebook, because Facebook's now coming out with a payments processor, right?
Yep.
So as a CCTLD, maybe you should also bundle in a Facebook page. Why not? You can do Facebook pages, right? Offer the two together. You don't just have to be a domain name registry. Depends how you define who you are. Remember the .tv example? They weren't a registry, they were an e-merchandiser. So if you define your purpose for being as a helping businesses in your country to get online, then you wouldn't limit yourself to just being a registry. You do Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, because you're helping the businesses in your territory establish themselves on the internet. So another competition about a minute clinic, who their competition might be. It's interesting that we have a show in the U.S. called Shark Tank. Maybe you've seen it or have your own version here. And they always ask the question of the entrepreneurs, so who's your competition? And if the answer is we don't have any, they never get funded, right? Because you always have competition. Even if you have been inventing something brand new, the money that you want to take from a customer is being spent on something today, right? Very rarely are you creating something that no one's spending money on. If it's a need, there's someone who needs somehow. So if your competition isn't obvious, then you need to dig a little deeper and figure out who your competition really is, right? Because there's always somebody out there. And that's, I think, again, important for CCTLDs to remember, too. We've already talked about, how to avoid the 800-pound gorilla, right? So the last thing I do as a business is I try to avoid competing with GoDaddy. I don't want to sell $8 names, a big 20 cents per name, right? And so I avoid markets that GoDaddy is going to be in. I go after a niche that it won't touch. So I know I won't do the extra work like DNS that .bank wants, so I focus on that. So these are just some examples of how businesses have positioned themselves versus the competition, how they've branded themselves. Right? Amazon.com wants to be the Earth, wants to convey that they're the biggest selection out there of not only books, but anything else you can imagine. At home, my son goes to Amazon Prime, if you're familiar with that service. You buy a tube of toothpaste and they ship it to you for free. So you don't have to go to the local store, just buy a toothpaste online. So it's like this, and now they're talking about delivery via drones. So no matter where you are, Amazon will try to deliver to you. So there's a lot of different competitive stories. So you need to think about what is for your organization or business, what's your story, right? It gets back to the elevator pitch. Can you tell your story? Because people love to hear a story. So what is it? And is it relevant to the customers you're trying to sell to? So this is all part of the SWOT exercise, right? Threats talk about your competition and how they might encroach in your market. You talk about your strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, you can't be all things to all people. So I'm not a big business, right? I don't have the depth that a GoDaddy has. You can call that a weakness. You figure out how to turn that into a strength and do things that GoDaddy can't do. So I can move a lot faster. I can make adjustments, be more nimble. So I'm typically, when a new TLD comes out, I'm typically one of the first registrars to support it. So I can move very quickly. And I take that lead over the competition who has bigger resources, who eventually will outspend me in marketing by getting out into the marketplace first. So these are just examples of stories, basically. You're more likely to remember, I don't know if you've seen the Jared guy from Subway. Subway is like a sandwich shop in the U.S. that makes sandwiches. And this guy used to be very heavy, like 400 pounds, and he ate every day at this Subway shop and lost 250 pounds or something. So he became the spokesman for Subway. And everyone knows the story of Jack, right? So it's a great way to represent the brand of Subway, which is healthy, good healthy food, right? It helps to lose weight. Who knows if it was true or not, but it was a nice story to remember. So there's a few more in here. We'll go through all this. The sales approach is important. You know, again, if you're talking to investors, for example, you might say, look, this is $1 billion market, right? So all I need to do is get 1% of this market, and I'm $1 million business. How tough can that be? 1%, right? The problem with that approach is a top-down approach. And again, most smart investors will walk away because it demonstrates you don't understand what it takes to acquire a customer and how to build up a bottom-up sort of sales plan. So they don't want to, no one's going to believe that sort of story, that I only need to get 1% of the market. And some of the new TLDs have actually put this into the marketing material. They've talked about what a huge industry their TLD string represents and how profitable they'll be if they only get 1% of that industry. What they haven't done is explain how they're going to acquire one customer, let alone 1% of their market. Right? And so they haven't done what we call a bottom-up sales approach.
I think if you know the list of the customer, you will have sales. For example, when I try to buy a book through Amazon website, I see at the bottom transaction. You may have a look at this books. So Amazon, they buy a lot of books. For example, books. So if you have more customer and you know his or her interest, you will have more sales.
Yeah. Right. You know, that only works if your customer already found your website. They're already there. Right? So the question is, how did they find you? How do they know you exist? Right? That's the biggest challenge, is that the cost it takes to drive someone to visit your website. Right? The acquisition cost, basically. And that has to be cost effective. So what a lot of the internet industry has discovered is the most cost-effective way of doing that, and LinkedIn does this. You join LinkedIn, and then they say, how about we invite everyone in your address book, right? Click here, we'll upload your address book, and now LinkedIn's got access to 1,000 of your friends, and you gave it to them, right? And so it's gone viral, basically. And Facebook does the same thing, Twitter does the same thing. So they didn't have to spend the money to reach those 1,000 people. They only had to reach you. And you gave them the other 1,000 and drove them to the website. But you're right. I mean, once you're there's all kinds of ways to upsell them and get them to buy more books. You know, that's why a lot of them offer the ability to review books, because people like to see what other people like that are similar to them. So your sales approach is very important. And this, again, is tied into, are you selling to your end user or only selling to your distribution channel or both? Right? So a big challenge, a lot of these new TLDs registered this keyword. Maybe it was dot plumbing or dot dentist. And they said, look, this keyword has 20 million hits when you do a Google search. You know, millions of people searching for this keyword. So we can just sit back and this thing's going to sell itself. Right? And they expect their channel to appreciate that and sign up to resell it. They expect their end users to appreciate that. But that's not how it works. Right? And so a lot of these keywords are simply not selling any names because they haven't taken the extra effort of understanding how to reach their end user, of trying to position what they have as something value add, to explain how it's different, better, cheaper than .com or the alternative. So there's a lot of ways to do sales and marketing. We've talked about quite a bit. Obviously online, through social media, email. I'll show you later an example of an advertising campaign that we're doing on Twitter, which is if you want to, so we can talk about that. We can talk about Facebook. We talked about doing things like trade show exhibiting. We have an example in a second about running online webinars. So a lot of these, sometimes your product has an educational component. You need to explain it before people will buy it. And so you can conduct a live webinar online and let people ask questions interactively. And it's a great way to sell your product in a very cost-effective manner. So your plan needs to talk about what different ways you're going to promote your product to reach your target customers. So I talked about, if you find the right person who can then upload all their contacts, that's much more cost effective, right? So a lot of new businesses will approach what they call the key influencers of the market. The people who already have a following themselves on Facebook or Twitter. And if they sell them to carry the product, they then market it to all their followers. Right? So that you probably have a way of, in your target market, let's say you're going to sell shoes, you find a blogger who writes about shoes that has 1 million people who read his blog every day. Right? You just have to, you sell him and he'll promote it for you to all his followers. Similar to what I'm doing with trade associations. Right? I don't try to reach 6,000 banks, I'm trying to target these associations. I convince them to do marketing for me. And I do it in a variety of ways. I offer their members a discount. Sometimes I offer them a commission, for every sale that they make to their member base. So again, more cost-effective way to find someone who can reach your audience for you. So we have some generic examples here of a different sales approach. We'll move along here. So this is part of the business plan where you talk about your staffing, your management team, where you might be located. So for example, what do you need for skill sets? Are they full or part-time people? Are they on salary, or are they contractor? Are they outsourced offshore, or where you can see a labor savings? Whether or not you need a physical workplace, or whether or not you can run a virtual business. So how much office space you might need to rent, whether or not the office space needs to be suitable for customers to visit, or if customers don't visit, you could probably end up with a warehouse or industrial setting somewhere where you don't need a beautiful building front. Whether or not you need to invest in things in terms of equipment. And again, when in the early days of starting up an internet business, you had to buy hardware servers, you had to buy the software as a big upfront investment. Even starting a registrar required a lot of software development, right? Nowadays, there's something called white label services. And you can actually use someone else's software and put your branding on it with very little investment. You can lease servers at a place like Amazon or some other cloud service provider, like Black Knight, without having to pay for the servers yourself. Right? So there's very cost-effective ways of starting up your business that doesn't require a lot of upfront funds. And so it's something to consider. How do you design your business model so that it doesn't require a lot of cash up front? We'll in the next few days, we're going to talk, both Michaela and I, about some of the services we use. And so we'll give you an idea of how we've outsourced, or at least created some of the systems we use to manage our business in a pretty cost-effective way. From a help desk to a call center, to just things like that. So we're talking about management team. Obviously, you need to They say in the US that investors are investing in people, not the idea, right? You can always change, huh?
It's not just the US.
Not just the US, so, you know, you can always change the idea, you can't change the people, right? So you want people who recognize they go down one path, they do what's called a pivot, which means they're starting over basically, because their first idea did not work out. But they're good enough so they can learn from that experience and take the money that people have given them and try to do something else with it. So there's a lot of examples in the startup environment of people doing this pivot. Twitter is an example. You know, it started off as something else, and they, after a year or two, they changed their business model and turned it into Twitter. So people obviously are important. And again, there's a variety of ways. It's not only people who are working on the business, but you can create a board of directors, an advisory council, and again, it's a way to look like you have the expertise you need, but they're not full-time dedicated to the business. Do you guys have an advisory council or external directors?
No. Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
It's on the to-do list.
Yeah. So a lot of the registries, for example, do have advisory councils. Bank, for example, has an advisory council of people who are going to help them manage this business going forward. PIR, which does .org, an NGO, also has an advisory council. You know, we're on the .US stakeholder council, so we're helping the .US registry figure out how they can compete and brand themselves in the marketplace. So there's a lot of ways you can, and as I discussed earlier, I want you to sign up for that online mentoring service. And that's one way maybe where you can find some advisors for your business. Right? And they agree to spend an hour or two with you every week or month, and they can become part of your de facto advisory board. Then finally, the money talks about how much money do you need. And this really gets down to what do you need for upfront investment, but also what do you need before you become profitable. Right? So are you profitable day one, or does it take a month, a year, 2 years, 3 years? When you make back your initial investment? I'm sorry? Break even, right. So I know when I was doing a business plan for in a corporation, I was asking for millions of dollars. They wanted me to show break even at 4.2 years. Right? That was I had to have a forecast that showed I could break even in 4.2 years. So they were willing to lose money for the first 4 years, as long as I could show a trajectory at that point. You know, venture capital money, typically, venture capitalists are looking to get an exit strategy in 8 years. Right? They certainly want to see some profit before that. So that's part of the discussion here is how long can you go? Before you run out of cash, right? So if you're going to lose money for 3 years, you got to make sure you have cash to keep the business going, or it's just going to run out of cash and shut down. So it is kind of critical to forecast that. We're going to talk more about this when we get into actual examples of some of the registries that are running out there today. We'll be able to show you their forecast. And you typically do 3 different scenarios, right? You have a likely case, and then you have a worst case and a best case. And you do a sensitivity analysis where, what if we charge $20 but we don't get the volume we expect? What if we charge $50 but the volume is even lower? So you do a sensitivity analysis and see if pricing is the driver, or volume, or something else is the driver to your forecast. So I talked earlier about the last thing you want to do is come in and claim this is $1 billion market. You only need to get 1% of the market, right? That's what I call a top-down approach. Is a failed approach. So you want to do more of a bottom-up approach. So here's an example of a bottom-up sales strategy. Right? Let's say I'm going to say my goal is $144,000 in the first year. So rather than say it's 1% of the opportunity, I explain how I'm gonna get there, right? I'm gonna say, well, it's gonna take a salesperson to make 10 calls a day to reach a prospect. There's 240 days a year. 5% of those will convert within 6 months. Each one that does convert brings in $240. So if we bring on 5 salespeople, we can do this formula. That's how we're going to reach 144,000. Now the reason why that's an important way to do a sales forecast is it's easy to measure, right? Because you can not only you can break this down not only by year but by month. Now it won't be linear. You're not going to say an equal amount every month. Because don't forget, it takes 6 months to convert, right? So you would go further and say this target we're going to break down for the next for 12 months, which means the first 3 months we don't earn anything, and then we start to see a spike in year 5, 6, and 7, right? So you actually break that, you forecast that, and then every month you can say how are we doing? You do a report card. Right? And so you can actually have a metric to say, well, at month 4, I expect to have 40% of this done. I want to have $80,000 in sales. You don't have to wait till the end of the year to find out if you're going to make it or not. You'll know on month 4 if you're on track. And if you're not, what adjustments you have to make. Every one of these bullets is an assumption that you document. Right? So I'm assuming that a salesperson can make 10 calls a day. Well, what if he only makes 5? Right, I've got to redo my model because my assumption is wrong. Or what if it turns out that people take 5 weeks of vacation a year? Or maybe my number of working days. Okay, so every one of these assumptions you document. Because then you can revisit and say, was this assumption valid based on true history? You know, if the assumption's wrong, you can make that adjustment. Right? So that's an important part of putting together your revenue forecast. Is it's bottom up, and you actually realize your assumptions, right? You document your assumptions so you can always come back later and see if they're on track. All right. So this is what investors want to see: is this disciplined way of coming up with your sales numbers. It can't be top down; it has to be bottom up. That make sense, everybody? So we're talking about the business model, who the customer is, who the competition is, what your message is going to be, your sales approach, your management team, how much money you need to get there, and that kind of translates into this overall plan. Whether or not you need, how you're going to do your accounting, your legal, what kind of market research you do. Many companies will go out there and survey their customers. So they've made a lot of assumptions in this plan. They might survey their customers and say, how do you like this product? How much will you pay for it? So they try to do some market research with the actual target customers to see if their assumptions are right. When we build websites, we've done something called usability testing. We've asked people to come in and try to navigate the website to see if it's designed in an intuitive way. And so there's a lot of market research you can do with end users, with real live customers, to determine whether or not your website's well designed, whether or not the positioning statement you have or tagline actually resonates with the target customers you're trying to talk to. So the suggestion is you need to get out of the office, talk to customers, talk to partners, and ask them to give you feedback on what you're doing. So we've talked about the elevator pitch. These are just ideas of different elevator pitches. You at some point you need to just describe your product in a way that describes the features and most importantly the benefits of the product. Right? People like to hear about features, but they buy on the benefits. So you might say this has DNS sec. DNS sec is a feature. right? The benefit is security against fraud, right? So that's the benefit as opposed to a DNSSEC or DMARC email security or SSL service. Those are all features. You talk about benefits. So when you come up with your benefits, you have something called a USP or unique selling proposition. So what makes your product unique versus the competitors? So this is an interesting challenge for TLD registries. You know, what's unique about your CCTLD? Obviously, it allows a business to brand themselves to be from that country. Like no one else can do that, right? So that's your unique selling proposition. And it won't appeal to everybody, but your hope is that it appeals to enough people that they're willing to buy your product. So again, we've talked about, this is really summarizing. We have to put together, identify the customer, who the market is, how we reach them, through what sales channel. You know, what language they might have, where they live, what title they have in the organization, are all part of defining who your target customer is. So, you know, demographics, buying behavior, sales, etc. So some of the target market strategies for your customer is, what is your marketing message? It's interesting, there's one TLD called .bio. So they've decided to have two marketing messages that have nothing to do with each other. In Europe, bio means biology. It's like going green, right? It's like buying organic products. And that's their marketing message in Europe. In the US, it's short for biography or resume. So in the US, they're marketing it for put your online bio. And so they're trying to have it's almost schizophrenic. They've got two different brand messages depending on where their customer is living. So it remains to be seen whether or not it will work, if they can pull that off. Or if in the US, I get my .bio and I find out it's being used differently in Europe, I might not be too happy that it's my brand and .bio. So again, you put together a competitor matrix, and the SWOT's the best way to do that. So if you list all your competitors down here, you not only identify your strengths and weaknesses versus the competitors, you can identify theirs as well, right? And hopefully there's an inverse relationship. Your strengths or their weaknesses, so you find the best area to focus. We've already talked about the sales approach. Make sure that's bottom up. So a big part of any business plan is what's called the risk mitigation section. So what could go wrong? And this is really where you pretty much list out all your assumptions that you made, right? You list all the assumptions in your sales plan. You list all your assumptions about why you think your product's going to succeed in the marketplace. You're assuming that your competitors are going to be static. What if they change? What if they do an acquisition? So there should be a lot of thought given to what could go wrong, because the probability is something will go wrong, right? It happens all the time. So nothing stays static. A lot of the new TLDs that are coming out are making the assumption that the legacy TLDs are going to stay the way they are. But in fact, they are evolving, right? .org, for example, has a lot of competition. We're going to talk about this in a second. They have .green, .giving, right? They have a lot of people targeting nonprofits. Their strategy is to cannibalize themselves. They're coming out with .ngo. Right? They're going to take customers from .org and kind of move over to .ngo. Because if they don't, those customers will go to some other new TLD. Right? So they're not static. They're evolving to compete with new TLDs. So your risk section is very important. And of course, funding, which we'll talk about more later. Capital strategy talks about whether or not you need investment just to get this business off the ground. So in the case of new TLDs, for most of them, the upfront investment was the application fee to ICANN and the cost it took to put together that application to ICANN, $185,000. Figure it took another $200,000 to $300,000 in consulting and legal fees to put that together. And that's your upfront investment if you're the only one applying for that TLD. So .Buzz, which we're going to hear about more about his marketing strategy, he's the only guy who applied for .Buzz, so that was his upfront investment. But if there are multiple people who are applying for that same TLD, now they go to auction. And we see that, .Law had to pay almost $20 million just to win .Law, Minds and Machines, right? They paid $20 million to win that auction. So their upfront capital investment before they have one dime of revenue is $20 million. So calculate the break even on that, right? We're talking many, many years in the future. And they're lucky if they'll see anything, if they see positive at any time soon. You guys, so a lot of what startups need to do is bootstrap. Right? How can you start your business with a minimal upfront investment required? And McKelly and I are going to talk about that in the next few days about how we would start a business today in this industry without spending any money. He's napping now. He's going to be alive in a few seconds. All right.
I'm assuming about you.
I know.
Any questions on that?
Probably jet planes.
Yes, just a question.
Yeah.
We were always arguing about the difference between strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. That seems to be an idea that we have never solved. Maybe you can tell me your insight about this.
I'm actually, I was going to have you spend more time on that tomorrow, but I can do it now, if you'd like. Yeah, I'll do that now. I'm going to first talk about my favorite word. And I did this at a conference 2 weeks ago, and I think it worked pretty well. And what I said was, I wasn't the only speaker, but I said, I only want you to remember one word, and I'll say it again this week, all right? When we're done here on Thursday, if you only can remember one word about the entire week, there's only one word I want you to learn.
Money.
Money, no, you gotta write this down. All right, look at this. It's not on my screen, hold on. This is the one word you gotta remember. It's actually 2 words, and I'll fix that. But it worked last time because it got tweeted constantly, and I think I was successful in getting people to remember this word. And I bring it up because it's part of the SWOT analysis. My screen showing? There you go. So the one word is position. I've already said it a few times. So position is the one word. And what I'm going to do here is there's a classic book by this guy called Al Rees and Jack Trout, right? It's one of the 5. If you're a marketing person, you should have this on your bookshelf. It was published like 25, 30 years ago. And so it's all about positioning, right?
Is it
Battle
available
for your
on
mind.
Amazon?
I'm sorry?
Is it available on Amazon?
Of course it is.
All right.
I have the 20-year anniversary hardcover of the book. It's really nice. But the thing is, you want to, just like I want you you guys to remember the one word about this class, positioning, right? similar, you want your customers to think, when they think of your business, to think of one word. What word do you own? Right? Do you own a category? Right, when I say, just think of some categories. Coffee shop, right? What do you think? Who owns that category? Premium coffee, right? Yeah. So there's, so you want to own, and maybe you want to own, you want to be the either own the category or be the brand that people think of for that category, right? And so that's positioning, right? People have, and in many cases, if they can't own a category, they create a new one, right? And so this is a concept created. I want to say this is back in the 80s by these guys. I highly recommend you read up on this book. Talk about brand positioning, right? So it's a concept so simple, people have difficulty understanding how powerful it is. Just own that one word. When people think of a product, your brand comes to mind, right? So they articulate it as you own a piece of your consumer's mind. It's not what you do to a product, it's what you do to the mind of the prospect, right? So your position is in the product's mind. Is whenever they hear you, they think of something, your product is positioned a certain way. So let's give this kind of, Colgate. This thing is protection. Lux these are old brands, obviously. So again, it's kind of old, but Starbucks is a good example. Who do you think of when you think of the safest automobile? Who's branded themselves as the safest automobile, would you say?
Volvo.
Right? Volvo, which is Swedish. At least in the U.S., they are seen as the safest car you can buy. Yeah, but Volvo has gone overboard in conveying they are the safest car possible. Right? And so there's, IBM brand is always thought of as you're not going to get fired for hiring IBM, right? And by that token, in this industry, you don't get fired necessarily for using VeriSign as your back-end registry provider or going with GoDaddy. And so the idea that you can't go wrong with a certain brand is pretty important. I'm sorry?
You sold me a book.
Excellent. Well, I'll hopefully sell you more than one book this week. I should be an Amazon affiliate, right? Go to my affiliate page. Amazon will pay me. I don't know if they still do it. You still pay people $1 if people bought a book for your recommendation. Right,
I used to make good money out of that.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
So the reason why this is so important is that you're competing for people's attention, not only their money and their time, but their attention. Right? Everyone's busy, they got a lot of things on their plate. How do you make sure when they need a product or want to buy a product, they remember to reach for yours and not someone else? And so the point here is everyone's busy, being bombarded with marketing messages. And it's tough for any of this stuff to get through. Right? So the easiest way to get into a person's mind is to be the first mover advantage, is what a lot of people talk about. Right? So Kodak invented the handheld camera, Polaroid did the instant camera. So whoever's out there first typically grabs the early market share. If you can't be first, redefine what market you're in. And they're basically saying if you're not first. So in the U.S. again, anyone know the top car rental company in the U.S.? Who's number one?
Who?
Number one car rental company. Hertz, right? And Avis, who was always number two, actually, that was their advertisement. We try harder. We're number two. They used to have a football star called O.J. Simpson. They would show him running through the airport. That was Avis trying harder to catch up to Hertz, right? So that was their position. We try harder than Hertz because we have to. So the point here is you want to get into the prospect's mind as being the first one to introduce this product, right? So it's all about positioning. We're first. So there's a variety of ways to do something. You can be new or different, but you can also manipulate what's already in the mind. So you need to, as they say, find a unique position in the prospect's mind, according to what the prospect thinks, right? Who was the first Diet Cola, right? Probably Diet Coke. Although, in fact, I don't think they were. I remember growing up, we had a drink called Tap. That was Diet Coke. But Diet Cola was able to establish themselves as the first diet drink, even though they weren't necessarily the first. So it's all about perceptions in your target customer, right? Not necessarily reality. So you create a perception. It's difficult to change behavior, but easy to work with it. So do you want a car called Turtle, or do you want a car called Lexus? So I've been involved in a lot of exercises to name new products, right? And for example, we'll show someone a prototype of a product, and we'll ask them, what animal does this remind you of, right? And what you want to hear is stuff like tiger and leopard. You don't want to hear turtle or sloth, right? That's not a good animal to be associated with. So you can do some market research and see how people perceive your product in terms of things like animals or colors. What colors do you think of when you see this product? So talking about vision, obviously Amazon was great on building the vision, right? And in fact, the brand itself gives you an idea of the vision. It could have, Barnes & Noble, which is another bricks and mortar bookseller in the U.S., actually owns book.com. So they've got the generic word, they sell books. How come they're not bigger than Amazon? Well, Amazon, with their branding, conveys this massive inventory of books. And so that positioning in the mind of the consumer said, we can get any book you can possibly imagine. Just search us, right? And so by conveying that sort of vision to the end user, that's how they won first the book marketplace, and now virtually anything else you want to buy online in terms of consumer goods. So there's a lot of, this is just some keywords about how to do positioning. I don't want to spend too much time on this, because we're going to spend a lot of time in terms of the DNS market, in terms of how folks have positioned themselves. And these examples are so old that I think it predates most of us. One of the things that I'd like to bring back to the domain name industry. We have a lot of registries that have just rolled out their product without any marketing, without any advanced advertising at all. And they've come out, so we've seen this product. No one has said why this is better, cheaper, faster than the alternative. There's no early adopters for the product. So there's no proof point saying someone else has bought into it. And so the patience part is very important. The smarter new TLD registries are doing something called founder programs. And so they'll identify a few dozen early adopters that agree to brand themselves on that TLD, launch a working website, and they'll hold off, they'll delay the onset of sales to their channel until those founders are up and running, right? So that's patience. Several TLDs, I mentioned I was working with Doc Realtor. They're limiting who can get their name. The first phase, you only can get a name for your individual name, so Tom Barrett, Doc Realtor. If you were a company like Remax or Century 21, you're not eligible yet. So their first phase is just individual names. They sold 100,000 of those. Next month, they're rolling out the corporate names. right? So be very patient about who can buy their name. And right now, in fact, it's only available in the US. They're going to gradually roll it out overseas as well. So having a patient way to grow your market rather than having the temptation to say anyone in the world can get it, we don't care who they are, we don't have anyone using this yet, so there's no proof points, is especially applicable to how these registries are rolling out their business. So the idea behind positioning is don't look at the product and its features, but what position in the marketplace you want to occupy in relation to the competition. So again, it gets back to how do you figure what that is. We're going to go through a SWOT analysis to figure out here is the space I can occupy where the competition is weak. It would not make sense for me to occupy a space where I've got competitors who are stronger in that particular space, right? So it'd be silly, I think, for Michaela to say, he offers the lowest web hosting for anyone in the US. That's not a strong position.
But what I've done instead is I've taken the marketing videos for most of the GTLDs and I've translated them into Irish. So if you want to learn about .co, for example, we have a video on our website, or hopefully it's on our website at this stage, which will tell you why .co is the domain to have. But it doesn't tell you in English, it tells you Oscar bit.
Gaelic?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you said, Gaelic or something else?
Irish.
Irish language. Okay. What percentage of the people in Ireland can understand Gaelic?
At some level, it's a pretty high percentage can understand something, but can actually understand that video. It's a very small percentage, but that's irrelevant because they're a very motivated percentage. Very, very motivated.
Right. So you've got passionate people.
Exactly. Who love the Irish language.
So again, we're talking about how the brand will answer questions about what's the unique selling proposition, how is this different from the competition, and is this credible, right? Is my fastest internet guy Legion? You know, you can claim to be the fastest guy, but
It's gone. Oh God. All
I know.
so fast they have to build it.
So that's his claim. The question is it credible, right? How does he back that up? And typically, there are websites that, well, he probably has hopefully an industry study where someone has done benchmark testing. And he can prove that he's the fastest internet, right? It's credible in some way. So they're saying keep it short, make every word count, be as specific as possible. You may have to change it from time to time, so this is important. You know, we're doing this now with the .us, CCTLD. We're helping them update their branding, making it more relevant, making them compete against .com and new TLDs. We look for this key insight that truly makes them stand out. So this does require some interviewing. You know, it used to be in market research, you could do a survey of 1,000 customers. Or you can sit down one-on-one with individual customers. And they said, all you had to do was meet with 7 individual customers one-on-one, and you'd get more valuable information than if you surveyed 100. Right? So it's quality of time spent as opposed to quantity. Spend 10 minutes with one customer, you get more insight than surveying 100. So that's one way to get this insight. And again, asking questions like, what animal does this remind you of? What color does this remind you of? Things like that. And so the insights are categorized. You either solve a problem or you create an opportunity for the customer. So it's a benefit-related type of insight as opposed to, we've got something to do. Faster is a, you get, why do you care if something's faster, right? It's a feature, it's not a benefit. The benefit is you can watch your movies without lag. You can play online games without lag, right? Those are benefits because of their fast internet. key insight, people complain that soap leaves their skin dry and tight, so they're talking about how this is a moisturizer. So this is obviously some old positioning for soap. So insight is two separate thoughts related to each other in a new and fresh way. Something that's enduring, meaning lasts, and it might lead to several insights. So you only need one that gives you the greatest competitive advantage. So when you do your strengths and weaknesses, you might have 10 strengths, you're always compelled to list them all. Wait, is this A, B, C? Wait, there's more, and you keep going on, and then you've lost people because they can't keep track of all those things. So you just want to highlight one or two things that truly makes you competitive in the marketplace. So your insight here is the basis for your positioning. So how do you find one? So how can you improve someone's life? Right? What are the conflicting needs that people face that a brand can solve? How important is it that the product delivers? Who will notice? So this has to do with a faster internet. Who's going to notice if you have a faster internet? Right? People watching a movie or playing a game. What's the standard of excellence in your category today? So you need to be crystal clear in your positioning, be consumer-based, make sure you're relevant and credible, back it up with benchmarking surveys, for example. Make sure you're writing in easy to understand English. In the U.S., they say you have to write at the level of an 8th grade education. Right? 8th grade is roughly 13, 14 years old. You want most people to understand what you're trying to say. So you can't use big, long words and long sentences. So in order to be competitive, you need to be distinctive and make sure you're persuasive with your unique value proposition. So obviously you have a brand name. That's what people see first. There are 4 types of brand names typically, or trademarks we call them. The one is a very descriptive trademark. And the problem with descriptive is it's a dictionary word. A lot of the new TLDs are dictionary words. You're unable to trademark something that's descriptive. So you can't get a trademark on a book if your business is selling books. You can get a trademark on Apple as long as it has nothing to do with the fruit, right? Or an orange, as long as it has nothing to do with the color of the fruit. So there's different types of brand names. Some are stronger than others. So you want something that Amazon is called suggestive. So you have descriptive or generic. You have suggestive, which again is a dictionary word that suggests something, part of your vision. You have something arbitrary, which is a dictionary word, but it's not being used in a dictionary meaning at all. So Apple is an arbitrary trademark. Very strong if you could associate your brand in someone's mind. And the best kind of brand is called coined, or made up word. So Kodak is a made up word. No one else has that word. In Circa, my business is made up. So until recently, I was the only business that owned that word on the internet. That changed last year.
You mean in Circa?
Yes. So I now have, and so I monitor trademark filings in the U.S. 2 years ago, a business that makes infrared cameras for military vehicles filed a trademark on in Circa. Right? So obviously it has nothing to do with domain names. Nonetheless, I had a lawyer, I sent them a threatening letter. We compromised, they agreed to only use it for infrared cameras in military vehicles. And as it turned out, they let their filing lapse and didn't go through with it. And then I had another company come out, and they're using Encirca for monitoring crops on a farm. All right? Again, nothing to do with domain names. The problem is this is a multi-billion-dollar corporation called DuPont. Right? And I'm not going to scare them away with a cease and desist letter. So I didn't stick a lawyer on them. And sure enough, I'm on Twitter, and until recently, I have the only trademark on it. Well, I did have the only trademark on it. So I obviously, I own obviously the .com. I own like 20 TLDs. I also made sure I had the circa.farm, just to make sure DuPont didn't have any ideas of getting the .farm TLD. I have circa.camera. I got circa.services and circa.technology. So all defensive registrations to prevent these other companies from grabbing my made-up name.
But you don't insert it all, right?
I do not have a circa.iu yet, that's right. So for a coined word, I have a problem. Imagine if you have a dictionary word. You can't stop, there's all kinds of potential brands using the exact same word. I mentioned we were very active in .bank. Turns out banks have a lot of common names. They're called Citizens or Union, right? And so we have a lot of banks that are concerned about that they're first to secure the .bank name, and it's first come, first served. And so we're coming up with ways of not only making sure that our customers get there first, but we're coming up with a value-added service I call the fallback service that says if you can't get your first name, what do you want us to apply to as a backup? And we'll apply for that next, right? So grabbing your name and that's all just banks, right? So they're not competing with any other industry. But it's important, the more unique your brand is, the more likely you'll be able to defend it and secure it with a domain. I'm gonna skip over some of these, because I know we still want to get to SWOT analysis. I just want to make sure we cover the positioning before we get to SWOT. So obviously your brand name should be simple. The word I have, the two rules I follow with a new brand name is when you hear it, you should be able to spell it. And when you see it in writing, you should be able to pronounce it, right? And I'll admit right away within Circa, I don't win that test, right? So if I do in Circa for you, if you hear it, you don't necessarily spell it this way, right? You don't know if this is a C or an S. You don't know if this is a C or a K. And so as it turns out, I have probably 20 different spellings of this name registered in .com. And I've discovered over time, customers misspell it all the time. The most common misspellings, they leave out a letter, right? So I get E-Circa, they drop the N. Or they drop the R. So I have to defensively register a bunch of typos on my name, because that's how customers are thinking and stuff. I'll show you my newest brand that I launched recently, which I think is a much better path to the test. And I'm going to show you this website later. So it's called Calzone. So Calzone, when you hear it, I think you know how to spell it. And when you see it, you know how to pronounce it. So Calzone is a service I launched that is a calendar for the DNS industry. So obviously Cal stands for calendar, Zone stands for another name for domain name. So it's a somewhat conveys this industry calendar that we're trying to promote in the industry. The second test, acceptable in all key languages, it fails on that test. Anyone know why? So it turns out that this means something very different in Spanish and Italian. I think it means women's underwear.
Because when I saw it the first time, I was going, what? Why is he marketing a type of pizza?
You thought it was pizza. I'm okay with the pizza
It was
association.
a sock, calzone.
Yeah, I'm okay with the pizza.
Black Knight beat.
All right, so that was my quick pitch on positioning. How are we doing on time? 4:10?
There's coffee outside.
Yeah? Let's take a break, guys.
Is
Grab
there
a coffee.
There is coffee outside. time?
Yes, yes, it's
All right,
Yeah, okay.
let's take 10 minutes.
So see you. I'll be there.
They also tried to block .itv, and they lost that. So they're unsuccessful in blocking their ccTLD .tv. They're also unsuccessful in blocking .net and .com, except for that one case of ecom. So this is a formal process. The last one here is another ccTLD .sx, which is St. Martin. Tried to block .sexy and .sex, and they were not successful in either one. So there is a confusion issue out there for many ccTLDs. NG, it's already mentioned .ing, also .ngo. You're not alone. What's happened is, some other people did file formal objections. They were not successful, which means you probably would not have been successful at it. So what I want to talk about is not so much the confusion factor, but the true competition factor for ccTLD. So I call this coexisting in a new TLD environment. I actually spoke to this in Amman, Jordan a few weeks ago at the Middle East DNS forum. So we're just talking about, in Circa, our positioning in the marketplace, what we specialize in, which I've talked about quite a bit. And of course, you don't want to just to coexist in this environment, but you want to compete and win against these new TLDs. So as I said, it's all about positioning. That's the place your brand occupies in the consumer's mind relative to the competition. And the important thing is every TLD is a brand, right? As I said, Facebook.com/Circa has 3 brands, that URL. Not only Circa and Facebook, but .com is a brand. Your TLD is a brand, right? It occupies a place in the consumer's mind relative to your competitors. So whether you do something or not, it has positioning, right? Whether you're proactive or reactive or passive, it's going to be positioned anyway relative to your competition. So that's an important point to make about position. It's not something you create necessarily, because if you do nothing, it's going to happen anyway. So if you look at the legacy TLDs, I'm talking about both ccTLDs and GTLDs. Historically, they've had a monopoly in the local market, right? They've been the only game in town for people who want a domain name. They're typically very restricted. They might have strict policies about who can get some or get one. Maybe they have to be a company. They can't be individuals, right? Or they have to have a postal address in the country. They have strict policies about how it can be used, and they tend to be expensive. Again, they're the only game in town. There's no motivation for them to offer a low-cost product. And oftentimes they sell direct. So they don't have a wide distribution channel that sells value-added services. Right? GoDaddy sells not just domain names, but 500 other products. Right? Whereas if you're registering, if all they sell is a domain name, you're fairly narrow offering. So I think some of the legacy TLDs have become complacent. And now we have hundreds of new extensions. We've talked about this already. Some of these are completely open, like .com, and they're designed to compete with .com. Some are restricted, like .realtor, .ngo, .organic, and they're only going to be available to a certain vertical segment. So there's a cost of entry to get in. There's quite a few geographic-based things. We've seen .nyc, .london already come out, .berlin. So quite a few city names. There's also going to be some regional names coming out, similar to .asia, .eu. And there's a lot of brand names as well. Some of these TLDs are coming out with huge distribution channels. I mean, if you have GoDaddy carrying your TLD, you have potentially a reach of half the potential consumer market. Whereas Pharmacy only has 4 resellers. They're not going to reach as many as a TLD with Jura. And some of these TLDs are being pretty proactive in articulating to their customers how they're different. They're positioning themselves in the marketplace. Many of these TLDs are not doing anything. They're saying, here is dot plumbing. Here is dot roadie. You figure out what it's for. We're not going to tell you, right? So they're not being proactive. So even if they're not proactive, the market's going to decide for them what their positioning is. So today, there's 600 more choices that your customers have than they had 2 years ago. Right? 2 years ago, you might have been the only game in town. If you wanted to have a local brand, it was your CCTLD or nothing. There's now hundreds of choices. One of those probably targets, it slices and dices your marketplace. Right? So it may not be, like EG, this is all for Egypt, but it's got one for doctors, one for lawyers, one for plumbers, one for dentists. So it starts to pick away and siphon users away from your installed base. Clearly, .com has a lot of competition, right? So here are examples of other TLDs that have competition. .edu used to be the only game in town if you were a university or college. Everyone got a .edu. There are now a dozen different new TLDs taking users away from .edu. They've got competition.
AC academic.
We have a .academy. AC is a country code, right? We have it's not listed here as .phd that's coming out. .mba is coming out. All competing with
I know
ours.
several universities in the UK, Nottingham.ac.uk, Sunderland.ac.uk. I know several universities in the UK specifically.
It's only the UK.
The UK one.
Yeah, AC UK is run by the, it's not run by Nominet, it's run by a third party. It's run by the UK's Educational Network organisation. Essentially, they give the domain names away for free to academic institutions, but there are certain restrictions around how they can do it, and they only introduced some level of automation in the last 2 or 3 years. So ACUK, I have to double check, very huge number. In the UK, there's also SCH.UK, the schools. But see, with .edu was only open to American education institutions.
Really, American only?
Yeah.
So I was going to say their biggest strength is also the biggest weakness and vice versa, right? And so their biggest weakness is it's hard to get one, which turns out to be their biggest strength because if you see a .edu, you can trust it.
The problem is that it's fine in the US. Outside the US, you couldn't access it. You could access the EDU website. You couldn't register a .edu even if you were a university.
So Facebook, for example, started, in order to get a username on Facebook, you needed to have a .edu email address.
Yeah.
Very exclusive. They've since obviously relaxed that. So .org, I mentioned earlier, has a lot of competition. They're positioning the marketplaces where the world, the space for nonprofits. That's kind of their historical positioning, even though they don't enforce that in any way. But now they have a dozen competitors going after nonprofits. So that what these competitors are doing is slicing and dicing the nonprofit world. They're doing customer segmentation, right? So for example, .organic will take all the nonprofits that focus on organic products and foods. .vote will take all the politicians. There's a GOP, Republican, Democrat. Trying to take all the politicians' websites that are typically nonprofit. They're now, the .Catholic TLD, which is run by the Vatican in Italy. They plan to give every church in the world a .Catholic domain. All those churches today have .org websites.
Or .ie.
Or .ie. So this has the effect of of taking users away from .org. So CCTLDs, they're going to lose users too. So this is a particular focus on some of the geonames that are coming out that will compete with some of the CCTLDs. So they're city names, right? They're regional names. So you have Abu Dhabi, Doha, Dubai, Istanbul, Berlin, London, etc. Persian Gulf, Global, Africa is coming out. Even .co.com, which is run by a good friend of mine, which is not a real registry, made up. Someone has something with the domain name co.com. But it turns out there are 69 CCTLDs that have co in the second level. 69 countries have co. So co.uk, co.jp, etc. 69 CCTLDs have the word co. So the marketing message to all the customers of those CCTLDs, how would you like to have more global presence? You already use co in your domain name. Why not become a co.com instead of a co.jp? Right? Great marketing message for people who are living with a CCTLD today with the CO letters in the second level. Right? So that's competition. They're taking users away from CCTLDs. And then you have all these ethnic groups from .Irish to .Scot to .Desi to .Arab. Again, they could be appealing to your current customers of the CCTLD. And the threat here is not just the string might resonate with their customers, but the registry that runs them has more flexible policies about who can get the name, they have better, lower pricing, they have wider distribution. Right? So it's not just the string you're competing against, it's that whole supply chain that you're competing against as well. So there's different things that a CCTLD can do to compete. They don't need to be complacent and be static, right? So they can start offering some new services. They can say, we're going to offer DNSSEC, right? We're going to be more secure than the competition. We're going to do monitoring for fraud and other domain name abuse. We can relax our restrictions. EG only allows companies today, is that right? So why not allow individuals register domain names? Is that true? It's just companies who can register them? Why? Why not individuals too? Right? It's just arbitrary. So why not open up EG to individuals?
Why is EG closed to
You
non-Egyptian
can
companies?
use it under domain.game.eg, but it's not .24.eg directly.
Okay, but companies can get .eg.
Yes, domain.eg.
So that's a restriction that maybe you can question about. Maybe we should change that, or allow non-Egyptian companies to get domain names, not require. So this is how you might compete in the marketplace, right? Is examine those kind of restrictions and say, do they still make sense, or are we going to lose customers because we're restricted?
So if you look at the billboards from the airport to the No Hotel, which I did last night, I saw some of them where they're registered company name -eg.com.
Yes.
Yes, many of us. That's because the approach, EG not introduced with the commercial approach to the market.
No, so it loses market share.
There's a market.
So my point here is it doesn't have
It
to,
loses market share is the point.
but it doesn't have to stay that way, right? There's no reason why the CCTLD can't change their policy. EG.com, just like co.com, has been repurposed as a registry, just like US.com and DE.com. Someone might have EG.com and decide to offer it to the Egyptian marketplace,
I would.
right?
I would.
So that's how CCTLDs are seeing threats from outside that perhaps they don't anticipate. You might have some names that you reserve. We talked about it turns out a lot of CCTLDs may be reserved all numeric names or two-character names. That's an inventory basically that could be opened up and spark a new land rush for a TLD. Certainly the GTLDs are trying to do that with the two-letter names that have been reserved for CCTLDs. They want to open them up and do a premium auction and have another land rush. You could increase your distribution channel. So if you're a CCTLD that you're the only place in town to buy the name, why not sign up some other resellers who could reach more customers? And of course, that works best if you allow companies and individuals from outside the country to register those names, but it also works internal as well. So again, I don't know, it varies by CCTLD, but why not sign up your ISPs and web designers to resell your product? A lot of the registries we work with, they have a wholesale price, but then they'll say, hey, if you go to this trade show, I'll pay the cost of the trade show so you can promote my TLD. So they provide incentives for their channel to go to trade shows or to do a marketing campaign on Facebook or Twitter as a way to get your channel to market your product. And finally, and we'll explain this when you see the revenue forecast of the new TLDs. A good part of their business plan is charging a premium for their what they call high-value names. And so they identify for the marketplace the name's worth a lot of money, and they're selling that at auction. Now, this may be too late for a legacy TLD unless you have some part of your namespace that's already reserved, be it numerics or some other category of names. Why not auction those up? Yeah.
We actually have premium domain names, and we did make a lot of money from them like 2-3 years ago. But we realized that people they no longer interested in those premium domain names again because the GTLs are coming up. So what we now did was we released some of the premium domain names so that we could now get more income from that as well. So it's like, yes, one point in time we made a lot of money from them, but now we realize why bother? Better just wait one day, these prices will come down. So we just kind of release them into the market and making money in small quantity now.
Right.
Unlike when we made big money in fewer numbers before.
Yeah, I mean, the trade-off is you need to figure out if 5 years from now,
Exactly.
the market will be going up or go down.
We just figured that with the GTLs coming up, that there was no point keeping those names any longer.
Right. So like .us, they have one provider that has all the 5-digit numerics. Because the 5-digit numeric in the US is a postal code. And so they've tried to monetize that in different ways, including making sure only one company operates all as a network, or they're thinking that is more value than keeping that set together. Phone numbers is another potential opportunity, right? And some of the .tel, for example, tried to promote phone numbers .tel, and they got blocked by the ITU, who thought that was competing with telcos in a way, right? But there may be an opportunity in particular TLDs. And finally, the one I like to talk about is promoting your brand. This is about making the market aware that you exist. It's updating your positioning, right? So if you do have a distribution channel, don't assume they're doing it right for you or doing the marketing and branding for you. You need to brand for the marketplace to remind them why your TLD has value over what's coming out in the marketplace. As they say, all the legacy TLDs seem to be falling back on with a brand you can trust. We're more secure. Right? That seems to be an important thing for .com and .org. These new ones, they know, has been, make your weakness your biggest strength. So if you're going to keep your restrictions in place, brag about it. Say, we don't let anybody in. We're an elite club, basically. And so you can trust people because they've been vetted through our validation process. So you need to turn your weakness in that sense into a strength. And so this is talking about staying on the radar. I'll talk more about Calzone later this week. So some examples of TLDs, CCTLDs that have changed. So .us, which Michaela and I are on the stakeholder council, so we're holding a virtual town hall next month. We're doing market research. We have some target customers to say, how do you perceive our brand? So we're actually doing some market research with customers for .us. .uk, which used to be third level names like co.uk. Just last year, opened up. You guys make sure you fill out that survey form too? Perfect. Thanks, guys. So these are examples where people have evolved. .org's, I think, a great example. They saw there was a dozen TLDs competing with them coming out into the marketplace. They applied for some more of their own to cannibalize their existing brand. So .ngo they're competing with themselves. But better if they keep that customer than lose it to someone who's running a competing registry. And they're doing a value add too. So this is an example where you don't have to just offer domain names. So with .ngo and ONG, they also offer a community, a social network. So NGOs don't have a lot of money, so they're offering a free profile page on the social network that includes the ability for that nonprofit to raise money from their community and to have a presence in their community. All right, so this is something that's just a takeaway for the legacy TLDs. You don't need to be complacent. You don't need to be passive. Anticipate these new TLDs eroding your installed base and be proactive and emphasize how you're different, what your value add in the marketplace. So this is just repeating the earlier brand and what positioning is all about. And the fact it's going to happen no matter what. So you might as well be proactive and control the outcome. All right, guys, that's it. That's all I have for today. Any questions?
Will you be able to give us the material on the website today?
For the slides?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to update that tonight. So by tomorrow, it should be on the website.
Sure.
We'll send out a URL.
I can write the website.
Yeah.
Can you share the URL that we showed earlier, where there's a list of
The confusion?
yeah.
Yep. It's on the website as well. I'll make sure we have those links on the website that's published tonight. But it's not going to be obvious from this URL. So
Here's the website. Yeah, that's -dc.eg. As soon as I receive the material from our instructors, it will be uploaded to the website.
I'll make sure that website includes this URL as well. Okay.
Okay.
So thank you very much, guys. I think this has been a long day. If you can fill out your feedback form, I'd appreciate it. We're not going to try to do a breakout session today, but that's something we'll take up tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow morning, if you have an elevator pitch, be prepared to do that in the morning. Or if you want to just talk about an idea or problem that you want to make sure we cover during the rest of the course, you can bring it up then as well. Yes, please. I have more feedback forms up here if anyone doesn't have one.
Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, as soon as you're done with the feedback form, we're done. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Just a second.
What time do you start tomorrow? 9 a.m.?
Yeah.